glad to see you. I'm glad to see you, man.
Yeah.
She just had a delivery.
Yeah, now that we decided like a pickleball mecca. Seriously, there you go. You know, how's the guys? I'll trade you 3 miles of sidewalk for a couple of pickleball courts.
Yeah. Okay, I recognize what your hair is.
Yeah.
Is it finally over? Are we gonna have some sun? How you doing, Brian?
How you doing?
So we're gonna have some sun. I heard it's cooling on. Oh my God, the rain is just, I can't even imagine what the golf course is like right now. They gotta be so soaked. Yeah. So are you aware of any you're touching the ears, you know? Yeah. Nope. But I don't know if it's a. I thought it was raining. I think that's part of the solution.
Testing. Can folks hear us in the back okay? Can you raise your hand in the back if you can hear us?
I was Senior Patron.
You hear me?
Hello?
You know the funniest thing I heard? Is the traffic engineers really make
They said that maybe that's the funniest thing I heard.
Right in the middle of the roundabout. They're doing a Vice Road. They got those things. That's what we're doing on Rumble. That's what they're doing on Rumble. They're not dating.
If everyone would mind taking their seat, please. We're going to try to get started again and keep on time. So these are some of the questions that we've had submitted from folks that showed up this evening. And once again, we're going to change the format. Each candidate will have 2 minutes initially, and we're going to alternate again with 1 minute responses. And I do appreciate y'all both staying to the timing. It helps things move along smoothly. So first question, and John goes first on this one, with Brian getting the last word in response on this one. How will you support the Legacy Center, which is the nickname for our city's potential future cultural arts center, which could be part of the new town center?
Wow. Yeah, I think that the town center will be anchored by some kind of a community center with some kind of a performing arts component, a performance hall. And I think it's important because of the nature of this that we look at it in a multifaceted way. I think that it would be irresponsible to look at it simply in terms of that the Johns Creek taxpayers should pay for all of that. We have got many potential other sources. It may be that if we can get the right situation with the developer, because after all, it's not going to be the city that probably builds this, it's probably going to be a developer, a private commercial interest. So I think that we need a mayor that's going to be creative. I think it's important that we have someone that's going to be determined, that's going to be proactive, that we're going to try to make something happen so that it might be that there's a combination of things that happen with other governments or with private foundations. If we are going to have a facility that may be regional in nature, then it seems like it may be required that we get partnerships in the region and not put it all on the backs of Johns Creek taxpayers. So yes, I do want to make it happen. Now look, if I tell you that I'm going to do something, I'm serious about it. If I was opposed to it, I'd tell you. But I want to see this happen. It'll be something that I'm very much going to work on, but I'm not going to assume the how of what exactly the Performing Arts Center will be. And I'm not also going to tell you the how of exactly how we're going to pay for it, because that, in my mind, would be irresponsible when we have got to look at all possibilities. And I think that if someone says, like my opponent has, that the Johns Creek taxpayers are going to foot the bill, I think that that is something that is not a serious proposal.
Right. So the question was about the potential for the Legacy Center, which is the nickname for the future potential cultural arts center within the town center. So how would you support the Legacy
I'm
Center?
totally legacy.
Yeah, I support the Legacy Arts Center being part of the town center. I don't know what my point is, but I said the expense will fall all on taxpayers. I know we got to have developers, we got to have partnerships, we got to have philanthropic donors or whatever we can do in order to raise the money to make this happen. It'd be kind of short-sighted to think, oh, you got to have private-public partnerships in order to make something this massive to happen for our city. Because we have to make sure that we have a balance of residential, commercial, and also entertainment. So, and I think that would be definitely an asset for the town center, make it vibrant, exciting, what our community wants, what our community needs, so they don't have to go to other cities to enjoy plays or musicals, whatever type of performances that the Legacy Arts Center might have. Very important for our city, very important for us to support the arts community, and I'm definitely in support of that, to make sure I do everything I can to help raise funds, bring developers in, try to get them philanthropic donors, partnerships, whatever we can do. And we can use some of the other cities as models. We visited some of those other art centers to see how they got theirs done. So there's several different ways we can do it. We just got to find out what's best for Johns Creek.
1 minute response, Council.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought that I had heard that you had told the arts community that you were happy to see us float bonds to pay for the Legacy Center. So it was understood that you meant the Johns Creek taxpayers would be on the hook for the entire thing. I just want to say that when you think about the fact that we have got so much talent here in Johns Creek, a lot of our young people are very talented. I do think that the Performing Arts Center will be something with its classrooms and so forth that will be a great way to house all of the different youth that they want to develop here in Johns Creek. So it's not just all about us. It's not all about us going out and having a glass of wine and enjoying some good music. It's also about developing the talent of our young people, and that is something that, as we are pursuing, trying to make Johns Creek the best community, it is about community and health and wellness that we develop our young people and give them those outlets here in Johns Creek.
Last word.
again, the art center would definitely be an attraction. I think it'll be an asset to the town center project, and I definitely support it. It is great for our youth, our kids, and our talented musicians here in Johns Creek to have a place to perform. Right now, there's only a couple places, and I don't think they are really big enough to actually hold good crowds that would be attracted by musicians and some of the talent we have in the city. So yes, I mean, I definitely support the project, and I would do everything I can as the mayor when I become the mayor to raise the money to make sure that it happens.
Right. I'm going to try to combine a few of these that are very similar topics. We've got some that share kind of common themes. Thank you, John. So I'm going to try to combine some of these topics that have common themes, and if we could extend the time on this one. I know both candidates mentioned this first in their opening statement, which is public safety and kind of policing. So let's extend it to 3 minutes per candidate with a 2-minute response on this one. If y'all are okay with that. So you both say you want to continue to have a strong police force, considering the issues of rising crime across our country. Would you support growth in the size of the force if that's what was needed? What are your thoughts on the concept of reimagining the police force? And what can be done to make sure all members of the community are protected? And this one, John, Brian goes first. 3 minutes.
Well, what I would do first, with our police department as your mayor, like you would do any place when you take over an organization or a specific area, kind of do a self-assessment and audit to make sure we're doing the best we can do and we are as efficient as we can be to make sure we are combating crime in whatever areas that are fluctuating, areas that are concerning. The main thing with police and public safety in general is you have to make sure that we're doing everything we can with what we have. So I wouldn't say imagining police. I know you hear this all the time. You did last year about defunding the police. It's not about defunding the police. It's about reforms, making reforms, being smarter. That's what I did with my initiative when I came up and started the mobile crisis unit. It wasn't about defunding the police. It was about reform, doing something that's needed. We all knew that mental health is an issue here in our community, all over this country. So when we know that 1 out of every 5 calls that the police get deals with some type of mental health or person in distress, that's why I came up with the initiative, the mobile crisis unit, to relieve that burden off the police, to make sure a behavioral health care technician is riding with the police to de-escalate the situation when the police are called. Because a lot of times, if the police are not trained, that situation will escalate instead of de-escalate. So with the mobile crisis unit and the behavioral health care technician riding with the police, it relieves that burden off our police. It's about being smart. It's about addressing the needs of our community. Because believe it or not, we have a lot of people that are self-medicating themselves, and sometimes they're at home with their families, and sometimes when they're not doing the things that they should be doing, they put their family in danger. And when their family's in danger, guess what happens? They dial 911. And they're not dialing 911 to get the police to come out there and put somebody in jail or arrest someone. They're dialing 911 because they're needing help. They need resources. And that only resources come when you dial 911 is the police sometimes. And so that's why I think the mobile health, the mobile crisis unit is a benefit to our community, to give our police another option, to give our community another option, and relieve the burden off our police officers to make sure we address the needs of our community. And that's all about reform. It's all about being smarter and more efficient.
It's true that my opponent opponent did bring to the attention to the city council the news that there was grant money available from the state for a mental health clinician. That is something that I think everyone thought was a great idea. I would, just for practical, setting the record straight, just tell you that they are not typically riding around in the police car. They are in the office, and they are dealing with situations as a reaction after the fact. Usually it has not been but a couple of times that they have actually been brought out of the office to actually go to a scene. I would just say that, look, a year ago, we were getting hundreds of emails saying that we should defund the police. And meanwhile, our police officers were being vilified. And in some cases, they were the ones that were the victims of attack. Look, I spoke out publicly and forcefully against that. My opponent was silent. Look, I want to make something perfectly clear. I am always going to be for anything that makes it where the police or any other part of government is accountable, transparent, and that we are going to ensure that there is equality under the law, that everyone is to be treated with the same amount of equal respect and fairness. But I'm also not going to play politics with the police, and I'm not willing to do things that are going to interfere with the police's ability to do their jobs. We were seeing over decades in the United States a decline in crime. That has unraveled largely over the last year, and it's no wonder why, again, after we have basically vilified law and order and the police. And so, look, I appreciate how much time you spend in the police department, but I don't understand the kind of policies that you advocate. Like Citizen Review Committee, okay? The only other place that has this is Atlanta. It would put a chill on law enforcement's ability to police. There are reforms that we can make. I mean, look, I was happy to vote for body-worn cameras so that there would be accountability and so that there would be transparency between the officer and those that they interact with. But I'm just not understanding when I hear things like, suggestions that we should put a social worker in every patrol car. So, look, we can talk about what is going to be the best for Johns Creek. Johns Creek, we have 1,400 people for every one officer. Alpharetta has a policy that they say 500. The FBI recommends 1,000 for every 1,000 for every one officer. Anyway, let's not decrease the police.
1 minute. We'll do a 2-minute response. Brian, please, Johnson.
Again, my opponent doesn't have his facts straight. I propose that the city of Johns Creek have an advisory, not review, advisory committee to help the police engaged in different situations, to let the police know what's going on in the community, to look at the policies, if need be, to see if things are outdated, to see what we need to do better. It's called advisory committee, an advisory role only, not review. Atlanta is the only one. He's right. That's the only thing he said that was right. Atlanta does have the review board. Advisory board does not. Only as an advisory committee capacity to the chief of police. That's all it was. To make sure that we're covering all the bases. So if something happens in our community, you already have citizens plugged in. You already have citizens reviewing what the police does. It's not to control the police, it's strictly to have better relations and foster the relationship between our community and our police. Because there were a lot of tensions last year all over the country, even here in Johns Creek. And we have to deal with that, and we have to be mindful of that. And again, I was not silent, and my opponent was definitely out of touch if he said I was silent, because I was not silent. I was definitely not silent. That's why I came up with the mobile crisis unit. And of course, he doesn't know what goes on in the police department. Again, it was never recommended to have a social worker in every police car. Nobody does that. It's all about when a call comes up regarding a mental health issue, that mobile crisis unit, along with the behavioral health care technician, will go to the scene.
Well, I tell you what, I'll make an offer to you and everybody here. If there is video from our work session or council meetings in which you did speak out against defunding the police, then I will publicly apologize if that's the case. My memory tells me that that is not the case. Now, I think it's important that we have community policing. I think it is great that, we did go through a very tumultuous time last year. We had a situation in which we had to move forward, and we had to put some very unfortunate things that happened in our police department with the old police chief. That was something that gave us the opportunity to move forward and to let that department heal. The morale of the department was horrible. The tension in City Hall, you could feel it. And so, one thing that I've been criticized for is the fact that I voted for a settlement with that old police chief, because that was the only way. We had a very bad situation with no good options. And so, we were faced with, well, does he get fired, or do we have some kind of settlement? We were told that if the city manager were to fire him, that we would be sued and that we would lose. And so the decision was, do we pay a little bit now, or do we pay a lot later? And I was not happy to spend that money. It's kind of like when your car breaks down or you got a problem with your computer and you got to pay to get it fixed. It's not fun money. It certainly wasn't. It was painful. But I would make that vote again tomorrow, because that was the right thing to do to get that department healing and to get them back focused on the business of enforcing the law. And we would not have leadership in the police department permanent if we had not taken that step. We would still be dealing with the aftermath of that. I am proud of that vote. Thank you.
So moving to a completely different topic, I would like to hear a lot more about zoning and building density. And for this, John, first 2 minutes, we're going to go back to 2 minutes. First 2 minutes is yours.
All right, so like I said earlier about my background, I started Preserve Johns Creek. The way that I got on this journey was, I was told by my wife that basically I need to go to the homeowner association meeting. She said, whatever you do, don't volunteer for the board. I came back and I was president. I didn't handle that very well, I guess. But that put me on a path where I was paying attention to some zoning affecting my neighborhood. And eventually I started Preserve Johns Creek to protect the residential character and protect the quality of life. Now, that being said, I was always very much a believer in growth. We have got to have growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. But it needs to be selective, it needs to be quality, it needs to be additive to the quality of life for our residents. It needs to be something that is going to make our community better, not make it worse. And so just like the town center, I don't think that if we were to do the kind of population growth that some are trying to propose as a social engineering, 12,000 new residents in the Tech Park Town Center, that stands to overwhelm the infrastructure and make that not into an asset, but something that could be very detrimental to the rest of our community. And so yes, I would oppose too much density, but I have a record of being very fair and being open-minded to projects, and I follow the law, because ultimately, our job is in zoning cases to be basically a judge. We are one of a 7-judge panel to balance the rights of the community with the rights of the individual property owner. And sometimes I've had to make some votes that I didn't really want to make, but that's what the law required. And I'm proud that that's always going to be what I'm going to side on. But during the time that I've been on council, we have seen high density really tamped down, because we went through a period of time where it was a lot of apartments, and I think that was great for our community.
Chip, I'm sorry, I have to change the format a little bit. I have to address what John said about our police chief. I have to, I can't let it go. I apologize. Okay. Now, my opponent said that he voted to give our former police chief a settlement. He didn't say how much that was. We're talking about $250,000. $325,000. Right, John?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you think that, then tear that police department up and split it apart, you got another thing coming. $250,000. Not only that, they force the victim who made a sexual harassment complaint against the police chief. He knew that when he agreed to that agreement. Did I agree to that? No, absolutely not. I said it should have been terminated because it was a termination offense. That's what tore the police department apart. Making decisions like that, no integrity, no moral character, not being able to stand up and fire the police chief and give him $250,000 to walk away when he should have been fired. And you force a grandmother off the job? She was the victim. He won't talk about that, though. He's not going to talk about that. But since he brought it up, I'm going to give you all the truth. That's the truth of the matter. $250,000, what could we have done with that? You tell me. Sidewalks, trails, stormwater. $250,000. And that's what tore the police department up. That's why the morale was bad. Because when they look at that, you give someone $250,000 that violated policies in the police department. You don't do that in police work. You don't do that in any job where you have policies and rules. Thank you.
And I appreciate, and this is the way that, and John, I appreciate that. This is the way that Brian chose to use his time. Brian chose not to use his time to address the topic that the community wanted to hear about, and I respect that. That's your choice. So we're going to continue to move on. We tried to make this less of a debate and more of a forum to hear the candidate opinions. So if we could keep it, I understand that we all want to respond to different things. If we can keep it on track, that's the idea. And if you choose to use your time differently, then you choose to use
Probably
your time
gonna
differently.
have to.
I appreciate that. And we can, and I understand that we've got to. He didn't change the format, sir, and I just he chose to use his time not to respond to the question that was given to him. If John decides to use the same, we're not going to let this degrade down into to a back and forth. We could be here all night. It's not productive. So we're going to try to keep on track. And I'll let both candidates make the choice. If they want to respond to the questions from the community or use their time to address each other, that's up to them. Next question from the community. Can you both address the overbuilding and overuse of Newtown Park? Can some activities currently used at Newtown Park be moved to Colley Creek? And for this, Brian, you have the first step.
Sure, we know Newtown Park is overused, it's small, we need more park space. Colley Creek is definitely an option. We will have athletic fields there to sort of compensate our shortfalls in parks, our shortfalls in athletic fields. It is definitely one of the parks that we'll be able to use to make sure we accommodate our community, because we just don't have enough parking. We don't have enough athletic fields. There's a high demand for our athletic fields, and that's what Colley Creek will fill that gap with some athletic fields that we're falling short of. Just unfortunately, like I said, we don't have enough to meet the demand. And so, yeah, Colley Creek would definitely be a park